Marc Thomas has had an interesting career journey. Like many of the marketers that I know, he got his start in journalism. But what makes him a little bit different is that he jumped right into the world of business, becoming the co-founder and starting a company called Dupol, which has since been acquired. Since then, he's worked to grow various companies, an agency, and now works as a growth marketer at Podia. Most notably though, Marc has this knack of creating B2B content that goes against the grain, which is actually how this conversation came to be. Music videos, creative content, and growth marketing. This episode covers all of the above. We cover the challenges of promoting a product when demand is low, the marketing lessons that this trial by fire presented, and how this has led Marc to create the anti-marketing playbook. A philosophy that aims to zig while everybody else zags. We also talk about how to fully understand your customers and their needs, but most importantly, Marc shows us his process for using that to create incredibly creative content that, in my opinion, is starting to generate a bit of a cult following. Enjoy! So, I want to start slightly earlier in your journey as a marketer because you started or co-founded Dupol and you described your time there as marketing on hard mode. Can you tell me a little bit about this experience and what you learned?
Yeah, for sure. So I actually was a journalist by trade. That's how I started off working in magazines. And I had this client once, because I did brand journalism as well. And I had this client once who basically they couldn't make up their mind about something, and so me and a partner, we decided to build this product which basically would allow us to pose a question and then they could all vote live in the room, so that we could just finish the conversation with a decision.
What do you mean vote in the room? What room are we talking about? Is this related to journalism?
So if we're in a meeting where we're pitching a project, they can all talk about this kind of this project, the concept, and what they would end up doing is the goal that we were trying to get to was that they'd be able to all have a say. You'd see the results live on a big screen in the room, in the boardroom, and the junior members of the team wouldn't feel like their bosses were. Like they were kind of contradicting their bosses because it was all anonymous, right? So we built this tool. The client never used it, but we managed to raise like a significant round at the time of investment for a product that had 0 customers. And I was just like, looking back on it now, I should have been like, we shouldn't have done that.
That's how we learn, man.
And so I had actually never really done marketing. Not really kind of content stuff, but never really done any marketing work. And we sold that product for a couple of years, and then one of our co-founders left, and the business changed a lot. And suddenly we were like, we really, really need to make this thing work now. We've invested a couple of years. Let's learn how to properly market this thing so that we're not just doing sales all the time. That's what we were doing. And so I went off and I was like, I'm just gonna hire somebody who can teach me how to become a marketer. So I went and basically I did the demand curve growth program when it was really brand new. I think they'd done 1 or 2 cohorts of it prior. And that was like pretty transformational in my life, to be honest, because it's how I got into growth and marketing. You asked about why that was hard mode. It was hard mode because no one wanted the product.
Oh.
It's extremely hard to market a product that most people don't want. So we were going up against like SurveyMonkey or Slido or Typeform. Heaps of different competitors, and it turns out that lots of companies already had one of those kind of embedded in their thing, right? Like most companies have a survey tool. It's a really hard market to compete in, and we never managed to differentiate ourselves meaningfully. And basically, what I ended up with was like flogging this horse, and like we were growing, but slowly. It was like grinding every kind of month where we added revenue. It got churned out in the next month by someone else, canceling and stuff like that. And so I had to basically grow this company without anyone really wanting the product, and also almost no budget, which is hard. Well, it was like, that was a great experience in some ways. I mean, I still sort of have a little bit of PTSD from that time.
We've all been there, man. We have all been there.
Yeah, that's it.
Interesting, man. Is there anything you would do differently with that if you were trying to solve the same problem?
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely. So what I learned since is companies, almost everybody is doing the same thing, right? Almost everybody is trying to grow their company in exactly the same way. And one of the reasons that they do that is because it's like an insurance policy, right? It's terrifying to try something that is not normal, to do something that other people might not try to grow their company. And yet, when we all do the same things as everyone else, we all look the same. No prospect thinks, I'll buy this company over that company, because we just literally are looking the same. There's no reason for them to choose any one company. So going back, what I would do is I would get closer to customers to find out what actually makes a difference for them, and what they actually want. And then I would reposition the company as, this is what we do. We're not for anyone else. We're also we're doing this differently. We're addressing the customer's fears, their desires, their kind of broader aspirations, and building things that the customer actually wants rather than doing what we think.
Yeah.
And that's going to come through in the marketing as well. I think if we did that, we would have been able to grow that company quite well. But hindsight's 2020, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I hear you. I mean, looking around at the content that you are putting out at the moment, it seems like you're having a lot of fun with LinkedIn, for example, right? And I wanted to ask you where you got your ideas for this content from, but you recently said, having interesting ideas is hard, but there's a secret. You need to feed your brain with weird inputs to get interesting outputs. And this kind of relates to, trying things that aren't normal. So my question for you is, where do you get your inputs from for those sketches and those minimalist electro motifs that you're kind of putting out there at the moment?
It's really funny because as I said to you, I got into marketing via journalism. I wrote about culture and art and stuff like that mostly. So for me, I've already got a fairly sort of significant, we call it corpus, basically, right? There's a large amount of sort of disparate kind of sources. There are a high number of those, and so for me, honestly, right now I'm pulling from a lot of that kind of, this is a cultural influence for me, or I read this book and I had this idea about it that I applied to something else, and I think that there's this. A lot of people want clarity in life. They want clarity in their work. They want clarity in every part of their existence, and yet creative ideas come out of almost abstraction. So let's say I remember reading once a book about anarchism, and it was like a kind of anarchism 101, right?
It's not the cookbook, is it? We're not talking way back.
Some explosive ideas from
da, 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 da.
And I read a chapter in there about children's playgrounds, and that there's a theory about anarchy that anarchists have about playground design, that actually children will self-regulate if they're in a dangerous space, and they'll be able to actually achieve more interesting play because they are, as a group, decided what to play with. So they leave them with construction materials and all that kind of stuff and just let them go.
Right.
And I remember thinking that's really interesting. And then actually there are elements of that I could apply to a project that I'm working on. It was a branding project for a kind of big. It was actually the Eden project, the big sort of big lunch thing.
The down in Cornwall, that one that you're talking about. Am I thinking about?
They've got this big program that they do called the Big Lunch, where they encourage people around the UK to host a street party.
Okay.
And I was like, well, we could just bring elements of this sort of this kind of anarchy into this campaign, which is about trying to get younger people to join in with this, because they're basically seeing old people host street parties,
Yeah.
And you know what, this kind of like I got fired so badly from that job.
What happened? Okay,
I can actually tell you, because I think enough time has passed and they're probably not listening to that.
Okay, a Marc Thomas exclusive.
Unfortunately I no longer have the footage because we were paid to delete it.
Oh no, that bad.
But what we did was we came up with this concept of like bringing people together and kind of allowing these sort of weird ideas to come into the creative, and that was all based on that kind of anarchy and that sort of playful idea. But we shot three kind of TV spots. I mean, they weren't going to go on TV. They were on like YouTube and social media, and they were made to make people stop and go like, that's weird, or I'm laughing, or kind of, and get people's attention in a way that maybe the Eden Project wouldn't have done otherwise. The one that got us fired was we shot a commercial where basically an old woman sitting next to her, sitting next to a young guy, and this woman actually literally just arrived at my house. We shot it in my house, and she had just arrived from a hip replacement operation. Sat down on the sofa. The sofa was way too low for her dresser. And she reads this script, which is basically about how, she had always sort of seen him from the window in the mornings, and stuff like that. And basically these two had lived next to each other but had never talked. And then as the kind of commercial goes out, it pans out, and it's clear that like, oh, there's like this massive uncomfortable age gap between this couple who've come together over the big lunch. And then, the closing sort of thing is basically this young guy saying, oh, basically, I don't mind the age gap. It doesn't matter to me. It cuts to black. And then there's this inference that there is like some intimate act happening. There's the sound of false teeth dropping on the floor. And everybody I showed it to, including like the regional client, there's like a regional and a national client, they absolutely loved it. When it got to London and they were allowed their say, they were like, there is no way we're ever showing this. And I was just like, well, we've shot it all this year. It's like they're all done. They're all funny. People love them. And they're like, we'll just pay you to delete them and never talk about them again. But
holy shit. I was going to say, dude, this doesn't sound too bad. And then you started talking about false teeth hitting the floor and,
I'll leave it to the imagination what's happening there.
Yeah. I won't describe what I'm imagining right now. Man, how do you think that would have performed if it went out?
It would have been amazing. People would have loved that, right? So there were also two more. There was one with like, these were all based around like camera pans, basically. So they're close-ups of someone like this, and then suddenly the camera pans out and there's a person who's surprising next to them. The other one was like one where there's a woman talking about how lonely she was, and she's sort of a young woman, about the same age as me. It was 10 years ago or so. And she's talking about how the big lunch brought them together. The camera pans out, and it turns she's like, but he doesn't say very much, and there's a mime sitting next to her. That was the kind of punchline there. And then there was also one about a woman who'd never managed to connect with her her neighborhood, or really anyone around her hobby. And then she's talking about her hobby being about Russian dolls. She loves collecting Russian dolls, and we got this massive collection in the background and stuff like that. And then she was like, but then I went to the big lunch, and I met my neighbors, and it turns out we all have this shared interest. And the camera pans out, and there's a descending height order of people who live on our street. And so that's sort of
quite
like
interesting. That's cool.
yeah, they're kind of like fun. Some of them are, obviously the one with the false teeth was a bit much.
Yeah, I would have loved to have seen that. I'll ask you off the record later if you actually deleted that footage. But
I honestly did. I can say that on the record, and I'm really sad that I did, because what I should have done is just like, yeah, I should have kept it and then used it for a moment like this where promote this podcast episode with
through the
premium.
Yeah, maybe you can repurpose the fake teeth sketch for the gap between a CEO who doesn't get marketing and the Gen Z marketer. Yeah. So these kinds of things kind of feed into how you're creating content right now. Is there kind of like an example of that playground analogy, for lack of a better word, that you've been applying recently, sort of?
Yeah, sure. Let me think here. Well, like for me, the way that I really got started with this kind of the stuff that people know me for now is I was at Powered by Search, a SaaS marketing agency. I heard of it. And basically our clients at that time were all about to enter it was the end of 2022, so we were already seeing like signs of an economic kind of wasteland ahead. Huge amounts of churn, both like in the company and also in our clients' companies. And it was like everyone was having a bad time, right? And it's continued for most of 2023 for people.
It's been a tough year.
Yeah, it's been rough, right? And I was looking at my content, and I was like, oh man, so much of my content is just like, you're doing this wrong, or like, here's how you could do this differently, or I know best and you don't, because I'm in an agency and you're not. And I was just like, it's kind of like, I find it kind of gross. Like I look at it now and I'm like, oh, why? These people are trying really hard. And then I was just kind of like, well, what if I just totally switch my tack here, and I go from trying to like teach someone something because I'm like from this like place of wisdom or whatever, and I just instead try to make people laugh because they're having potentially the worst year of their careers. And so I was like, okay, well, how can we bring all this together so that this content is still here, this kind of quality of insight that we actually do have is still here, but it's packaged in a way that if you want to take it, you can, but if you don't, you can just enjoy what's right in front of you. And I was like, well, some people make these kind of like covers of things on the internet, where they make these, where they make sort of, Taylor Swift covers with, to sell their product or whatever. And I was like, that's really boring, I think, if I'm honest. I think it's boring for everyone. Like some people go, hey, I like that song. But it doesn't make someone listen. It doesn't make someone remember it. It doesn't make anyone kind of come away and go like, I enjoyed that piece of content really, and I'll think about it for 6 months.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, what kind of music do I like? What kind of music do people who are buyers like? And it turns out we have similar musical interests. A lot of people who were buying that product, the services, are at the stage of life where they grew up with like post-punk music. And so I was like, well, I really loved like Joy Division, or like even some kind of more modern stuff, which is like Sleaford Mods or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, why don't I just turn something about SaaS marketing, and I bring in these elements of like culture that maybe people never see with this kind of the content. So that's an example there of like putting this in. And the first track that I did as a music video for LinkedIn, it was about this framework that Powered by Search had called the predictable growth method. And there are kind of nine levers of growing a company that you can pull. And I basically I wrote a song that was very much like kind of that post-punk music, but walks through this framework. And I had people come up to me for like weeks afterwards, or work remotely, so message me on LinkedIn afterwards, saying like, I can't stop singing the chorus of this song.
That's incredible.
And I was like, oh, there's something there to that, like taking a cultural idea, which is, you know, post-punk, and packaging something that is meaningful to an audience in it is, I think, quite powerful, because it really, really resonates. And today, like, in fact, multiple times this year, people have messaged me and gone, I'm still singing that song. Or like, I'll often get LinkedIn messages that say, hey, I heard one of your songs. My kid was there, and now they won't stop requesting it in the car. And I'm just like,
that's mad.
You don't get that resonance from a normal LinkedIn post.
Yeah, mummy, can I read the ebook on CRM integration, please?
Yeah, I did one at Podia, actually. When we were launching a product, you know, I just joined Podia earlier this year at the Growth Marketing team, and I did one about called "Everyone Has an Email Newsletter, so why don't you?" And my kids will frequently be sitting in a bath or whatever and be singing to themselves, everybody's got an email newsletter.
Does it not haunt you when you're just trying to like wind down for the day though? Your kids are like, remember work.
Yeah, for sure. And like, you know, everybody is just trying to get through the day, right? A lot of the time, especially in 2023, it's been a
slog. Yeah,
we're trying to get through the day with as little kind of stress and kind of anxiety as possible a lot of the time. And so just simply going, I'm going to make someone laugh is both therapeutic for me, but also it turns out therapeutic for a lot of people.
It honestly feels like a breath of fresh air. Like, I've been following you for a while leading up to this conversation. And like you say, in the sea of don't do this, you're doing this wrong, then you have like you doing the robot all of a sudden, and the singing about newsletters. It really does palate cleanse, so to speak.
Sweet. I'm glad to hear it.
That's
great.
It sounds like, you know, I got my start in B2C before I moved on to B2B because, I don't know, I just found it easier. And I've always had this philosophy of stealing ideas from the consumer marketing world and bringing it into B2B. And it feels like you're doing that to an extent, all the way to this product that you've recently launched, Ideate, right? It's a card game. For those who, you know, aren't aware of it, could you like explain what the product is, but also where did it come from? Are you scratching your own itch, or where did it come from?
Exactly. So scratching my own itch. So let me explain what this is. So one thing I've noticed about marketers in B2B is, look, people have great ideas. There's like, there are no shortage of great ideas.
Yeah.
But often ideas can be improved by simply reframing the way that you think about ideating. So coming up with ideas is actually, or coming up with novel ideas is challenging, because it's what people normally do when they think about stuff. When they're coming up with ideas, they'll say, hey, I need an idea for this campaign. What have I seen someone else do that I found interesting? Now that is okay. Like, you can draw from cultural things, but actually what they often end up doing is drawing from other B2B marketing campaigns.
Right.
Now, you know, that's like you know, the film The Human Centipede?
Unfortunately, I've not seen it, but I've seen enough clips to know.
I've not seen it.
Yeah. Funny, wink, wink. It's a B2B podcast, I'll have you know.
Yeah, well, it's like the human centipede of idea generation, isn't it? Right? You put like an okay idea in at one end, and then it gets like, you know, passed through the system and then into someone else's ideas, and then just like by the end, you've got something so toxically boring, like that doesn't resonate, that no one wants it, right?
I can't get over this analogy, like, but it works. It works so well.
And you know, I for my whole career, I've been ideating, right? So people have hired me on the basis of, can we, like, you've got interesting ideas for doing specific types of work. Like, let's work together. And so I thought to myself, well, how do I do this? Like, how do I come up with interesting ideas? And one of the kind of tools that I use has been a version of this game that I produced called Oblique Strategies, and that was a series of prompts, thoughtful, interesting prompts by Brian Eno, the music producer.
Yeah, nice. Okay.
And Brian Eno created this card game effectively with there's like 80 prompts or something like that. Now, these are so abstract to them, they're probably not helpful for our setting. But they're effectively things like allow an easement, right? So that's a musical thing, right? Just, allow it to kind of breathe, basically. And he would, when they were stuck in the studio producing music, he would pull out one of these cards and then like show it to the artist, and the artist would have to think about it and stuff like that. And they were all related to music. So I was like, actually, I've used these because from my cultural reference is music.
Yeah.
But that's not going to be helpful for everyone who works in B2B marketing. But there is a version of this which is helpful, right? So I was basically like, well, I'll just write this version and create them as cards. So I did, and the whole idea there is that by giving people a sort of a random reframing of the problem that they're trying to solve, they'll be able to come up with more interesting campaign ideas that they may not have thought of otherwise.
Yeah.
So that's the whole story there.
That's incredible. I mean, I thought it was a physical product until I saw the download button earlier. Are you thinking of getting it printed and all that?
I'd like to at some point if people start using it. Let me. I'm gonna wait and see what people are, how they receive it and stuff, because I only launched it a couple of weeks ago. I launched it as a sort of a fun thing, actually. At Podia, obviously our whole product is based around selling products on the internet. And we're encouraged very much to do side projects. And I thought, this is one that I could do in a relatively short space of time, because I already have this kind of set of concepts in my head that I use. And so literally, I don't want to devalue this. I mean, it only costs $10, but I literally got out of the sauna one morning as my morning routine.
Amazing.
And I was sat in the changing room, and I was like, I've got to cool down anyway, so I'll just write down 100 questions. And I did. I sat on my little phone. I just sat down and typed out 100 creative prompts, basically.
Amazing. How long did that take you? 100?
Probably like 15 minutes or so, because I collected them for years in my own head.
I was going to say, you talk about devaluing it, but that's like a decade of expertise, just like.
I suppose that's true. Yeah. And then I thought, well, I'll challenge myself to launch this thing within like 2-3 hours max. And so I went from the gym to a cafe, and I thought, well, I'll just sit down. I'll put these into Figma and design them up and write the copy and stuff. And you know what? Like, in some ways, that's like the exact purpose of these cards, right? So one of the cards is add constraints.
I totally, that is such a strong principle.
It's a great one, right? And constraints can be all sorts of things. So you can, you can go from very abstract, like, for example, probably don't do this, but you could you could only use verbs or something in a first draft. Or you can go to very practical, which is don't think about SEO and that kind of stuff, right? And those principles are like really strong, and the good thing about them is they're all contextual. So if you are a person who uses SEO as a tool regularly, then maybe you want to stop thinking about it for a minute. But if you're a person who defaults to like paid media, then maybe you want to think about SEO, right? Because the ideas that you'll generate will sort of, you'll pull from new places in the kind of the idea world. And you'll come up with interesting new variations on those, and those will stand out to people.
Amazing, man. Yeah. As someone who operates in the content and SEO world, that one here is always, but it's different for an agency, isn't it? I'm sure you found at PBS. So everything that you've kind of talked about up until now, it's I see glimmers of it in an article you recently wrote that I read last week about your rinse and repeat framework, and it resonated with me, and it's definitely aligned with what I'm hearing in the B2B marketing world right now. So I would love to explore it. Are you happy to kind of first of all share what it is before we dive into the specifics?
Yeah. So rinse and repeat is basically a framework that I created to kind of do away with all the other frameworks that I have.
It's an anti-playbook of sorts, right?
It is an anti-playbook. My general thesis is basically we have run a very sort of homogenous set of playbooks, right? So for about 10 years now, the B2B marketing industry as a whole has run a couple of kind of key playbooks. There's stuff like, target high volume keywords with content that responds to them, or do the opposite, target low volume keywords with very
high commercial intent.
Right.
Yeah.
Now those are all fine. Those work and they're contextual, but the challenge is that there are a number of sort of things converging on us as an industry that we are just rendering these things to be effectively massively less valuable than they previously were. So just some of those things. Increased privacy concerns. So Apple's iOS 16 update basically made it really, really, really hard to run paid media. The things that you had to do are different because it's harder to track. Google Analytics becoming basically an unusable product.
I don't want to say trash, but we're all thinking.
I thought it would be great because I think I really like the way that event level tracking works, but actually the reality is it's turned into mulch. It's just a bad product.
It's a good word for it.
And then like there's a whole bunch of these sort of things, but the real killer blow here is that while all of this stuff is making it harder, other companies, so large software companies in particular, are effectively eating up markets. So in the article I talk about ClickUp. Now ClickUp started as like effectively a productivity tool, right? Like a normal to-do list sort of thing. And in that market, that's quite a hard market because there's thousands of tools that do to-do lists.
Yeah.
But over time, they dominated search. And then they were able to go, okay, well, we're adding team features. So now we're a collaboration tool. And that's a different market again. So they've got the existing market, that another one adjacent to it. And then they added other things like like time management tools, which is now they're a project management tool. So they've got 3 markets there. Now, if you're a small company trying to compete in that one of those 3, you're probably going to lose already, unfortunately, or your growth will be stunted. And then you've got a whole nother thing where they just recently added AI tools. Now, that's already built into their toolkit. So now they have an AI-powered project management or collaboration tool, which is just like, that's like a monster market. And the reason that's significant is that the tools that they are using to try to grow their companies, to grow their company are things like SEO or content or paid media or, whatever it is. You're using the same things, but they're doing so with huge margins compared to you. And there is actually a whole science around this. Companies who are larger will acquire more customers than smaller companies, but they will churn pretty much the same proportion and smaller companies. What that means is that over time, these companies will get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you will continue to stagnate in your growth, even though you're churning the same percentage of your customer base every month. That's a big problem. And so the reason that I'm anti-playbooks is because they just have diminished in value. They might work for marginal gains, and you should cover the bases, right? You should have content that responds to your buyer's needs. You should have paid media running, probably. But what you do is not, those playbooks will no longer drive the core growth of your company. But what will? Well, the reason the anti-playbook exists is because there is no playbook to actually make this happen anymore. The different opportunities are dependent on your context and on your customers, rather than on algorithms or on, specific channels. And that's why I came up with the idea of rinse and repeat.
It kind of perfectly aligns with almost everything that we've just talked about, right? Adding context to it. I think obviously some of the basics, paid media, search, it's kind of become table stakes. But what you're saying is either build upon it or do something completely different. And that's, I think, where the rinse and repeat framework comes in. So what does it stand for? Because rinse is a abbreviation, right?
That's it. So RIN is actually the abbreviation, and SE just sort of got nicely added in there. Yeah. So what it stands for is relate, ideate, and then narrate. All right. So let's go through those. So relate is about understanding your customer and your market and their concerns in a way that maybe other people wouldn't do. So most people end up going to like a surface level of each of these things. So they'll say like, we did some customer interviews. In fact, one time I worked with a company who, when we started working together, and it's not what I work for at the moment, by the way. Okay. I said to them, hey, like, let's do some customer research, because I don't feel like we have a clear understanding here of what customers care about. And they said, oh, we've done it. And I said, oh, cool. Can I see it? And they were like, well, we did it in like 2021. And I was like, oh, that's like almost 3 years ago. You haven't done customer research, right?
Yeah.
And also the other thing about relating to customers is people have a very sort of tend to have like quite a thin way of relating to people. So they'll ask a couple of questions, or they'll ask the same set of questions, and even if they're doing that over and over again, it's not really understanding a customer. You're not kind of building up this rich picture of humans.
Yeah, right.
Because we know we're more than just a few survey question responses. Like, you and I are both people with complex feelings, and so multiply that by say 100,000, and that's a company base, right? There are obviously huge amounts of variation, but there are kind of coherent themes throughout that you will discover. So the first stage in the thing is to in the framework is to understand deeply. So you relate to your customer and also your market. Like, where do the other players in your market fit in to this conversation? How are they addressing the themes that you're identifying? The end result of this should be that you have the best understanding of your customers, that they feel, well, they would feel if you were communicating it to them, that you get them better than anyone else on the market available to them. So that's relate. Ideate is about coming up with interesting and novel approaches to campaign development, right? So a lot of people, when they think about B2B, they say B2B is boring, but then they don't actually go further than saying B2B is boring. B2B might be boring, but actually it may be incredibly interesting to your procurement manager, who is like so into spreadsheets that they only want spreadsheet templates. I think that's a glib example, obviously, but ideation is about coming out with things that relate to your customers. So relate, ideate. The goal of this is to create things that respond to the research that you've done. It's to come up with ideas of not just content, but ways of packaging it and ways of delivering it and measuring it even that actually respond to your customers' things. Right now, like people have asked me about these videos, these music videos. Well, those are weird. Why do you do them? I'm like, well, they are weird. That's true. Like there's an element of taste there. But the reason that I can do that is because I deeply understand what people want. And I've done that by relating to them. I haven't just gone, I'm going to make music videos. Right? Like,
yeah. But how did that come about? Just to interrupt you a second, because obviously when you must have had these conversations yourself, and I don't imagine people would have said, I wish there was like more music sketches on LinkedIn.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah, totally. I think like the kind of the challenging bit of this framework is actually having a little bit of faith in your own intuition. So I relate to customers. At the moment, like my content actually responds just to an audience rather than customers, because I am spending a huge amount of time putting information that they're putting out into my head, right? So, I have an idea of who is in my audience because partly they're on my feed on LinkedIn all the time, or they're the people who I get onto calls with to chat to, just casual chatting, or I follow them, I get their newsletters and stuff like that. So all of these different inputs in my head, or I've seen their work or the things they're liking, and these are signals, right? And you build up over time this sort of like coherent picture from all these disparate signals. That if at Podia we have a much more sort of rigorous system for doing this, because we're doing this at scale. Podia's got over 100,000 customers. So the challenge there is to actually put some bones on this. So there we're running these kind of research sprints. They last about 45 days. They go from quantitative research to qualitative to quantitative to qualitative, and then a report which pulls out insights. And that looks different every time depending on the specific sprint that we're doing. But at the end, the goal is, okay, let's distill this research down into key themes. So the key themes are the thing that actually make it. Now, what do you do with those to ideate? You have to make some sort of leap. You have a sort of a test that you run, maybe like you put out a song, or you test a message as a video. Maybe you just do a text post if you're sort of limited for resource, or even your ads. Like all of this stuff, these are signals again for like what's working. And from there, you can develop it. So like I didn't just go, I'm going to make 12 months of music videos. I went, I'm going to make one music video because I think that people will respond to this level of humor. And it's a thing that I can produce repeatedly that no one else around me can. So there's an element of standing out. There's an element of understanding the customer deeply. And there's an element where it's in between those things, which is like, oh, that is sort of unique. That's a unique value. That's a unique approach. There is a novel concept here. I will test that novel concept. And if people respond to it, I will do it again. And that's how I think about that, certainly.
Yeah. Is that where the N comes in then? What does the N stand for?
The N is about narrate. All right. So so you got relate, you got ideate. Between ideate and narrate, there is an actual phase, which is an indeterminate length of time, which is you've got to do the work. You've got to actually produce the stuff, the campaigns. But in order to get management buy-in to do work like this, you have to have some sense of how you are going to show the value of this work. Right? You can't just do this work without any kind of ROI summary.
Of course.
But it's also work unfortunately, that you're probably not going to be able to directly attribute in many cases. An example of that would be like, let's say you decide to build a community because that is what your audience needs at that time, and for the foreseeable future, because it's a big investment.
Yeah.
How are you gonna tell your CEO that you're going to build this community? It's not going to result in any direct attribution. So you're not going to be able to say 50 people bought our 100K product on the basis of this community. That's going to be challenging, especially if you multiply that. So you go, well, 5,000 people bought our $10 product because of this community. And these things have to be there. You have to be able to say this stuff. So narrate is all about coming up with a narrative that works for your reporting. Previously, what we used to do with most marketing work is in technology and software marketing is to say, Google Analytics or HubSpot tells us that we've closed this many deals, or we've had this many conversions on this page, and therefore, like, this is the ROI. Well, Google Analytics is basically trash now. Not everybody has a sales-led pipeline, so we have to come up with different ways to do it. In every marketing campaign, there are a mixture of qualitative and quantitative signals, and there is a range on that of high to low confidence that you have in those, right? So let's give some examples. A qualitative signal of success is that when somebody enters a sales process, they mention to the sales rep your campaign. So that's a qualitative signal, and you can have a relatively high amount of confidence in that signal because somebody said it directly, right? Yeah. When I was at Powered by Search, people often used to tell the sales people in the conversations, "Oh, I love Mark's videos," or "I've heard that podcast that you guys put out over and over again." And that's a qualitative, high quality signal, if I'm honest. Now, there are other things, which are, how many views did that piece of content get, right? Did it get 1,000 or did it get 10,000? What's your expectation? That is a quantitative, but potentially low quality signal, because there is no direct correlation for you most of the time between the number of people who saw something and the number of people who bought something. Yeah. The reason for that is that we're on this matrix, right? We're on this kind of, attribution matrix. There is no direct line between there is actually no direct point on that matrix that is we bought. It's just a narrative that you're building. The trick here, though, is that you cannot just report on one of those segments if you want to do truly effective marketing. Yeah. The goal here should be to report on a narrative. So you're saying, we know that this is effective because sales went up by this amount during the period this campaign ran. That is backed up by the fact that many people mentioned this campaign during the sales process. But also we saw this massive number of page views, or we saw people interact with this specific element on our landing pages through screen recordings, or when surveyed, people said this, or, you're building up these narratives around this. And really there is no hope for you if you are now just relying on an analytics report. Because that analytics data is no longer correct for privacy reasons. Also, that Google Analytics makes it very hard to find it. And B, like these buyer journeys are complex for most people. Even on a simple product, like there's significant evidence to say that people will consider a product for a long time before they even buy it, before they even think about buying a product in a category. Yeah. And the goal should be to appear in their mind multiple times so that they associate you with solving this problem when they need it. You cannot show me an analytics report anywhere, no matter how good your data is, that actually shows that. It doesn't exist.
No, not accurately.
The cool thing about this, by the way, is that you can actually use this narrative prior to running the campaign. So you get buy-in by saying, like, okay, look, we're not going to be able to do direct attribution for this, but we will be able to show the benefit. We'll be able to show the progress. We'll be able to show the impact on these kind of metrics, on this kind of data that we're getting back. And we'll know that it's being successful if we see X, Y, or Z. And we'll know that we should pull back if we're seeing these other things.
Indeed.
And that's a pre-narrative, basically, of your campaign.
Fascinating. So narrative is basically building out a rapport source, kind of laying out how what you've done relates or didn't relate to business objectives, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it can be really simple. It doesn't have to be a large kind of spreadsheet with graphs or, and you might not even be able to do that. Really, what you should be able to do is relate. If your CEO came to you and said, why did we spend, $10K on this campaign? Or why did we spend $100K on this campaign?
Yeah.
You should be able to go, well, these are the reasons. And you should be able to list them off in a way that makes him go or her go like, oh yeah, okay, cool. I mean, no CEO is that nonchalant about spending $100K, but
if only. Yeah. Awesome, man. I know we're running low on time. I would love to just quickly hear maybe one example of how you've applied the rinse and repeat framework to what you're doing at Podia, like right now. What's something that's kind of worked well, or something that you're executing on that you're excited about?
Well, we're actually in a really exciting time. We're doing a lot of work. We've recently launched email marketing, as I said, and we also have in the past year or two launched a really effective website builder. And so Podia, which has traditionally been a courses platform, right? Sell your course or your digital products, it's become much more than that. And so we're kind of moving into different markets. In order to actually make that happen, you have to, as I said, appear in lots of people's minds for a long period of time with things that are recognizably you. And so we are thinking about ways that we can get in front of more people much sooner and do it over and over again. Now, one of those ways that we kind of understood this about our market is that we've been for a long time collecting self-attribution data. And we know that when somebody signs up to the product, they'll have often seen us on someone's YouTube channel or their email newsletter or something like that. And it might not actually be things that we can attribute, right? So it might not be search. It might not be any specific, campaign. But we do know that lots of people will talk about us, and they'll talk about us in these sorts of ways because we have the names of the channels. People tell us directly. And so we often research those. So that's relate. We can understand this specific part of the problem. And we might put in other things there. So a little while ago, we were doing we did an exercise where we were brainstorming campaigns. So kind of the ideate phase. Now, one of the insights that I have about people who use our product is that sometimes they will hit this, they'll hit this kind of like plateau where they feel like they've run out of creative juice, right? They'll feel like they've hit this level of kind of energy or block or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so when we were coming up with some campaign ideas, I was like, why don't we launch a sort of funny soft drink called Creative Juice? You could just crack open a bottle. I had this image of like someone cracking open a bottle of Creative Juice, just chugging it down. It's purple juice. And they can just kind of brainstorm. Now that idea is dumb. That idea is really stupid in some ways because, like, obviously, why would you launch a juice? Why would you? You're a software company.
Getting into the CPG world for the cloud.
Exactly. But when you think about this, like, think about a person who buys our product and they see, oh, these people have they've understood me, they've got me, they've produced this campaign, and so everyone in the team, including me, laughed when I pitched the idea. It was one of probably about 50 ideas that we talked about, and we sort of all laughed at it. But then we also had this idea to run a sponsorship program where we would sponsor our users' content on their channels, because the theory is basically they are our customers, and therefore they have audiences of people like them who are interested in their content already, who trust them, who know them. Let's sponsor their content so that they can talk about us with more people like them. And then hopefully over time, we will continue to get in front of them with creative, interesting ideas to the extent that when they want a website or they want email marketing or a place to sell their products, they'll come to Podia. So we launched this sponsorship program, and it was really good. One of the ideas that we launched with was from a YouTube channel called the Plant-Based Cooking Show.
Nice.
And I was like, this is the moment. We're going to get to Creative Juice. Because they've got this kind of style of sponsorship where normally they're sponsored by food brands,
Right.
And so they create a recipe with the food brand, the food of the brand that they're being sponsored by. And I was like, well, we don't have a food, but we do have this concept, which is Creative Juice. So let's get them to create a recipe for a plant-based purple juice drink. And amazingly, we managed to make it happen, right? So
incredible.
You can go and watch the episode on their channel. It's like a big old, it's a big YouTube channel as well.
What's the name of the YouTube channel? I need to watch this as soon as we're done.
I always get the name wrong. The Whole Food Plant-Based Cooking Show.
It comes up in the suggested. What's it? Okay, I'm going to
Creative Juice on the end of that, and they'll you'll see it there.
I see it there. 1 month vegan creative juice breakfast smoothie, and it's very purple.
It is extremely purple. I'm so glad they made that happen because
That's amazing, man.
Again, for us with this strategy, a core concept is make the brand recognizable, and Podia's brand is purple. So that was the key.
Amazing.
And in that video, they talk about how Podia has actually been beneficial to their business, but they do so in a way which is like, okay, we're predominantly making a juice. This is what you subscribe for. But also, these guys power our business, So we've done that with multiple dozens now of YouTube channels and Instagram accounts and stuff.
I'm guessing there are a lot of creators that watch some of these channels, right? Because you wouldn't immediately think that a viewer for the whole food plant-based cooking show would fit into Podia's ICP.
Right. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because as a course platform, potentially not, but as a platform to host your business, yeah, why not?
Yeah, fair play.
Business owners are plant-based people sometimes.
Yeah.
Like
those things do overlap. People need to eat.
And so we've decided to go very kind of broad with that, and just focus on the kind of the resonance over and over again. But so that's ideate, right? So we did relate, where we understood that they have this problem.
Yeah.
We did ideate, where they need to, we come up with an interesting idea that resonates with them, responds to their challenges in life, and then narrate. Now, Benjamin, who is our VP of Marketing, Benjamin Elias, is honestly like one of the most phenomenal people I've worked with. I thought I was smart. And then I met Benjamin, and Benjamin is intimidatingly smart. I sometimes feel like an absolute dummy when I'm in the room with Benjamin. And I'm honestly amazed that he managed to, kind of champion this idea in particular. I'm really impressed with it. But how I would build a narrative around this, I can't speak for Benjamin because I wasn't in those conversations, but how I would build a narrative around this is saying, well, look, this, how are we going to measure this? Well, this specific idea, we have a landing page for these people. So we will measure conversions based on the kind of the link, the specific link for this show.
Yeah.
So we'll obviously measure that, but we'll look at how many people viewed that YouTube video. We'll also look at how many people maybe saw the email that went out to their audience with the kind of the update about this episode and the kind of the note that it's sponsored by Podia. We might look at who later on in a attribution survey says, "Oh, I saw your Creative Juice thing. I thought that was a great idea." We could even look at searches for Creative Juice, and that's how we'd be attributing that stuff. So effectively, we don't own that channel. We can't look at the data, but we can build a picture of that and why that investment works based on this attribution matrix of like qualitative, quantitative, low confidence, high confidence, and that's how it all works.
Amazing, man. What an example to run through it as well. I'm going to jump off and then buy all of the ingredients for creative juice, because I'm not gonna lie, it looks delicious. And looks like there's some passion fruit in the thumbnail. So yeah,
we've got a custom emoji on Slack now for creative juice.
That's incredible, man. Awesome. Dude, thank you so much for spilling the beans on all of this. Before I let you go, there's one question I love to ask guests at the end of these episodes, which is, what are you personally most jazzed about that you're working on right now?
Yeah, well, I'm having a great time with these sponsorships, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
Because every one of them, like we find that the creative ideas are sort of doing quite well. So some people will read a kind of a pretty standard script that they've decided, and then some people will come up with an idea. I'm most jazzed about those, if I'm honest.
That's fair enough.
And it's impactful. There's always more ideas, basically.
Yeah, but great to hear that you're having fun with work, man. It's important. And finally, where can listeners and viewers learn more about you?
Yeah, the place to go for me is positivehuman.co. So that's my website. You can sign up for my zine. I'll call it a newsletter. And
rebrand.
That's my cultural reference. So positivehuman.co. And you can also follow me on LinkedIn.
Amazing. I'll include links to the show notes. Marc, thank you so much again. Really appreciate it.
Tom, it's been so nice. Also nice to meet you.
Yeah, likewise.
Next time I'll come on your podcast and we could talk about you, because I feel like you don't get enough airtime.